Some memories don't fade so much as they dim just enough to trick you into feeling safe. We like that. We like the little LEDs, the browser-like timelines, the red dots that blink when something moves. We tell ourselves that if the sensor slept through the night, nothing really happened. The truth feels harder to hold. Sometimes the thing in the building knows exactly where we're not looking. It waits for the moments we outsource our attention to plastic domes and silent logs. And then it moves where we've decided it can't. My name is Marcus Hale. I'm 38, former Marine, and for 5 years I supervised the night shifts at a tech campus in Plano, Texas. 3 low-glass buildings bridged with walkways, a koi pond you can't hear after midnight, and motion zones numbered 01 through 16. It was early summer in 2017, when the heat soaks into the concrete and rises back up even after the sun goes down. Our patrol fleet was a couple of golf carts, and I liked the ritual of the rounds, stairwell doors, badge readers, elevators, the humming of the HVAC like a distant ocean. I logged elevator cycles by habit, mine, the buildings, the stuck ones facilities kept promising to get around to. That's what calm looks like on a monitor, repeating patterns that confirm your boredom. Zone 12 didn't like patterns. It lived on the 3rd floor of Building B, a stretch of corridor that ended in a sealed tenant suite, the kind with paper taped inside the glass because the build-out had stalled. The sensor should have owned that stretch. It never did. Weeks of no activity. If I wasn't hearing the elevator stopping on 3 at 2:14 a.m., I might have ignored it. But 3 nights in a row, ding, open, ding, close, the sound bouncing off the marble in the empty lobby while the feed showed the car bolting past floors that weren't calling it. The DVR inserted a neat little buffer rollover gap right then, a polite apology that explained nothing. I told myself it was the building settling. I told myself a lot of things. Then I found shoe prints, 1 set, adult-sized in the dust by the sealed suite. Too clean for contractors, too fresh for old. The badge reader on that floor was dead quiet. The elevator panel jumped to service mode once like a nervous tick while I was 3 corridors away. No key inserted. Facilities sent a note with all the warmth of a hospital discharge. Zone 12, sensor N-OK, parts on order. They said it as if the parts lived in a fairy tale and would arrive when the plot demanded it. You get stubborn when a building makes you feel like a rookie. The next night, sometime after 2, I rode to 3 a couple minutes early and stood by the sealed suite door to see if the elevator would humor me. The lights in that corridor were on a motion chain. 1 tube wakes the next. I watched them flick in sequence toward me like a falling line of dominoes, and then they skipped the fixture nearest the sealed suite, jumped right over it, and kept coming. The cold that swept over my face made my eyes water. The motion log for Zone 12 read 0. If you've spent any time around drywall, you know the difference between the sound of a room clicking as it cools and a breath held too close to your ear. I heard that breath on the other side of the wall, like someone was bracing themselves to push, and the sealed door's closer gave this soft hydraulic sigh, not creaking so much as settling back into a position it wanted all along. I backed up with the stupid ambition that distance would make sense of anything. My flashlight beam became a line I didn't want to cross. I broke protocol that night and drew a thin chalk mark across the threshold. Officers carry chalk for tires, for little games with cleaner crews. This felt like drawing a circle you're not supposed to step out of. When the DVR coughed its 96 seconds away at 2:14, I was close enough to hear my own breathing in the atrium glass. When the feed returned, the chalk line was snapped clean, no scuff on either side. I didn't sleep when the sun came up because it felt like the building would start moving again if I closed my eyes. Facilities replaced Zone 12 the following week. "Good sensor now," the tech said, clapping his hands like he was waking a dog. The log stayed flat. Nothing. It comforted everyone except me. A month later, off duty, I stopped at a grocery store for eggs and coffee. Elevator at the back, slow and shallow ding, doors opening on 3. Every hair on my arms rose like the building had rolled itself thin and slotted into the world behind me. I don't ride elevators anymore. I take the stairs, even if no motion sensor in any stairwell ever tells me I'm really alone. There's a quiet that happens in a building around 3 in the morning where the fluorescents feel like they hiss through your teeth. I learned to time my footfalls to it, to make it feel like I belonged to the rhythm instead of walking across it. When I tell you I didn't want to be in that part of the hallway and that I went anyway, I mean it as a confession I keep re-saying to make it smaller. But there are nights that stretch you thinner than the tape across a glass door, and when they do, the red LED in the corner sleeps, and you have to decide whether you will too. There are things I don't know if I should put into words because once I say them, I can't go back to pretending they were the kind of weird you can laugh about. My name is Aaron Calloway. 29 when this happened, working a temp security contract at a suburban office park in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania, November 2019. Drizzle. Early darkness hanging low like the office park had borrowed a sky one size too small. One building had a law firm with framed degrees in fonts you feel judged by, and a daycare that spent the nights empty, mobiles on fishing lines stilled above plastic cots. The daycare sensors were notorious for false alarms. They'd bark if the heating coughed, or a hanging paper fish twirled by its own weight. I learned to swipe them away with my finger on the tablet and mutter the kind of curses you only use when you're alone. The ping started near 2 in the morning. Archive, Suite 240A. The tablet said it like a place I'd forgotten existed. The building map didn't list a 240A. The second-floor hallway did what hallways do. It went to the end and hit a wall the color of dentist smiles. The kind of wall you assume is hiding ductwork and wires. The motion log kept blinking. Archive, Suite 240A. The tablet let me tap the tag and pull up a ghost floor plan that placed a door exactly where the wall was, like a memory drawn over a face. I knocked. Not polite, not rude, just someone at work tapping their knuckles on a mistake. Nothing on the other side but cold paint and the feeling that my skin wanted to shrink closer to my bones. I started to turn away and felt the ridiculous need to listen again, to lean my ear like a kid on a dare. That's when my radio, which was always on channel 1 unless my supervisor pinged me, whispered a sound on channel 2. Not a voice. A humming, thin, tuneless at first. Then it settled into a lullaby my mother used to sing when I pretended to be asleep before she finished the dishes. It's funny what memory will lend a stray sound to make it less lonely. I thumbed the knob and it snapped back to channel 1 by itself. My tablet blinked. Archive, Suite 240A. On playback, I saw myself walk to the blank wall at 203. I saw my hand lift, saw knuckles meet paint. My hand made no sound. There was the slightest shiver in the image like the pixels inhaled, and then the timeline jumped without announcing a buffer or a rotation, just a clean cut that said nothing. I laughed, sharp and mean, because if it wasn't funny, it would be the kind of thing that would ruin my next hour. The daycare director came in early and joked about nap times when I mentioned patrolling that wing, like it was still a daycare after the sun went down. I smiled like we shared a harmless superstition. The hallway smelled like baby powder that night. Not strong, just the suggestion of it caught on the texture in the paint. I pressed my palm to the wall because I wanted the tactile relief of something solid fighting back. The paint felt cool and slightly gritty, and I told myself that the humming on channel 2 was the building burping its frequencies. The tablet's soft click felt, for once, too loud. I didn't realize I was holding my breath until I heard a tiny thump from the other side of the wall. Something dropped on carpet, the way toys fall from small hands when sleep is heavier than their attention. Then a giggle, breathy, a little choked, the way kids sound when they've been laughing too long and haven't learned how to stop on their own. The motion log read 0. The red LED above the hall door stayed dark like an eyelid that refuses the stress of opening. I went back to the desk because that was what safety looked like. A counter and glass between me and whatever my brain was making of cold walls and old perfume. I wrote the event down, even though there would be nothing to attach it to in the system. It felt like telling a story to the version of me who would need a reason for how my hands trembled pouring coffee. Maintenance found prints the next morning, handprints low and smudged, right where a kid would drag their fingers if they were standing inside the wall and wanted to stand up. By noon, they were gone. "Impossible," the painter said, because paint is quick to defend itself when people talk about damage. That night, the 240A tag vanished from my tablet as if it had never been in the building's vocabulary. If you've worked enough shifts, you learn that erasures have edges you can cut yourself on if you touch them too often. I didn't touch. I did my rounds. I changed my routes without trying to make the change look deliberate. Months later, off contract, I walked past a store that sells used office furniture. You know the kind, rolling chairs with one good wheel, modular desks that still smell like dry erase marker. In the window stood a daycare cubby unit, scuffed and sturdy enough to have held 100 tiny backpacks. I stepped closer without knowing why. Inside the middle cubby, shallow and careful, my initials were carved. My hand recognized the shape before my mind wrote my name. I don't remember carving anything there. I stood with the glass between me and a thing that claimed I had been somewhere the logs won't remember. Next time you pass a featureless hallway, tell me if your radio stays quiet all by itself. If I hadn't lived it, I'd file it under building anomalies and let it sink under the part of my brain that keeps passwords. I'm Luis Ortega, 47 ex-mall cop, now a solo night guard for a biotech company in Bellevue, Washington. February 2021. The kind of damp cold that sits in your clothes even after the dryer. The research park pretends to be a campus, koi pond and all. But at night the pond slicks over with a skin of fog, and the badge-only wings feel like they're testing whether you know the rules. Data center protocols are church to the people who work there. Humidity, temperature, the whole controlled environment theater where numbers are supposed to be halos against human error. Our motion sensors talk to the HVAC, detect a warm body, bump the set point a degree or two to keep the servers from running hot. It's not mystical. It's for fans and energy bills and comfort. At 3:07 that morning, the building management system told me occupancy detected in server room 3. The motion log for that room, which should be the thing that says, yes, a person put heat and motion in the air, stayed blank. I tapped the screen the way you tap a soda machine that eats your quarters. I walked there anyway. The room bit at my face in a way the others didn't. The kind of cold you only notice because a different cold has been polite long enough that your skin forgot to complain. The digital readout was a degree lower than baseline. I wrote it down like writing makes the cold warmer. Access logs had a way of making you feel like a detective. That feeling dies hard when you scroll and see a badge that belongs to a lab tech who died in 2019 show up as granted. IT called it a cache artifact. The way you call a shadow a coat hanging on a chair because language makes courage possible. They scrubbed the controllers and told me not to worry. I worry even when I tell other people not to. The cleaning crew had been canceled for a week. Budget, schedules, who knows? That's a line item. And yet, at 2:48 a.m., a blue cleaning cart drifted past the hallway camera outside server room 3 as if a gentle hand guided it around a corner. The kind of glide that makes you believe in careful work. The motion sensor down that hall slept through it like it was a dream the building didn't feel like telling. I watched the clip twice because once felt like a magic trick and twice felt like I owed reality the chance to say I misunderstood it. Inside the little window in the server room door, a pane of glass with a wire grid. You could sometimes see your own breath fog the reflection if you stood too close and exhaled like you were cooling soup. Condensation etched 5 streaks downward one night, slow enough I could count them settle, not like a handprint, more like something too cold to leave heat, tracing gravity with patience. I wiped the glass with the cuff of my sleeve. The streaks rose again in the same tracks while the motion log courtesy lighted me with zeros. You can think yourself into hearing things in a room that hums the way server rooms hum. The air is a body you help breathe. I leaned near the probe mic we use for manual readings, exhaled, watched the numbers tremble. A second breath fell a moment after, the kind you'd make if you had to copy someone else but didn't know why. I have a habit of wanting to solve that with a laugh. I didn't laugh. Across the hall, the emergency shower whooshed on for 2 seconds, the exact 2-minute window our DVR takes to spin its logs for the night. When the feed came back, the floor beneath the shower had a shine that only shows up when water doesn't bother to apologize. The company replaced the access controllers. No more dead man's badge in the scroll. No more cleaning cart if I pretended I hadn't seen it swirl past. The temperature in server room 3 stayed a degree low. Stack effect, the HVAC tech told me, words neat as a folded rag. I nodded because being the only person in a building who didn't nod was a different kind of problem. I still wrote -1 degree Fahrenheit in the log like a diary entry you leave out where someone else could read it, hoping that would make it less yours. When I fall asleep, I dream in patterns of blue LEDs, little constellations that blink in a rhythm I can't parse. Sometimes the room I'm in is fine, and the math of it adds up. Sometimes I wake up and the bedroom feels colder by exactly 1 degree, and I wait for the system to tell me that nothing happened, so I can pretend to believe it. If you've ever turned your head because you felt a breath that didn't belong to you, you know the hardest part isn't the breath. It's the way the world shrugs it off and asks you to get back to work. If you need me to prove any of this, I'd point you to a list that says no activity. The logs as smooth as a sheet of glass, polished by elbows and hours. But there's a point every guard reaches when you learn the difference between the kind of quiet that's earned and the kind that's imposed. The night teaches you to listen for second breaths, to watch for chairs that face storms by themselves, to chalk lines you hope won't break and then pretend to be surprised when they do. And somewhere between 2003 and 2016, and any time the building rotates its memory, there's a space the sensors swear doesn't exist. That's where the thing in the building waits. It doesn't have to move to unsettle you. It just has to let you realize where you've stopped looking. Sometimes the night pretends to be honest by letting you see yourself on a monitor. You watch your own routine, how you push a door with your shoulder, how you pause to read a laminated notice, how your reflection repeats in dark glass. It's comforting because it looks like proof, but a loop of yourself isn't proof. It's a lullaby. And somewhere between frames, the building decides what to leave out. My name is Dana Whitaker. I'm 62 now, a semi-retired nurse who picked up night security shifts because sitting still never suited me. This was August of 2014 in Des Moines. Thunderstorms muscling in after humid days, the kind of air that sticks to the folding of your elbow. The building was an insurance headquarters, 6 floors of carpet and framed mission statements, a glass atrium that went up like a greenhouse for people who liked policies more than plants. I took the elevator to 6 and liked to read in the employee lounge during my rounds, a paperback I'd tuck under the vending machine when a supervisor walked in. It made me feel like my time still belonged to me. The 6th floor motion sensor was shy. That's how I thought of it, like a small animal that only showed up when I was there. It didn't ping for anyone else. It barely pinged for me unless I was under it. Most mornings I'd come in from the night rounds and notice one lounge chair turned to face the atrium glass, as if someone had pivoted to watch lightning stride across the sky. The first time I laughed because of how dramatic it felt. The second time I checked the rubber pads under the feet to see if the cleaning crew pushed it without realizing. The third time I stood behind it and watched my reflection in the glass, small and stubborn, and felt the prickle of being observed by a building. The motion log said I was alone. Thunder makes electricity show off. Down the hall, the vending machines would flicker in sequence when a storm rolled over, their neon prices stuttering and the coils humming louder, as if the Snickers were trying to push themselves forward. The power monitors showed nothing. No dips, no hiccups, no blips to satisfy the rational story you're supposed to tell yourself when you're responsible for other people's sense of safety. I learned the building's breaths that summer. The HVAC was a tide that lifted and dropped a degree. The elevator cables sang a faint steel song you only notice when you're the only one listening. I timed my rounds to those sounds so I wouldn't feel like an interruption. The camera that watched the lounge had a view I liked. It caught the chair that always turned, the glass, a slice of the hallway where I'd appear with my paperback tucked under my arm, face shining more than I wanted because the air was sticky. One night, around 2, the DVR showed me in that chair, head slumped, eyes closed, chest rising and falling like I'd finally given in and taken a nap. I smiled at the thought. I'm a nurse after all, sleep is currency, but I hadn't napped. My pacemaker app documented my heart rate, flat and alert at the time the DVR suggested I had drifted. It wasn't the contradiction that scared me. It was the realization that the video was capable of telling a story about me that my own body contradicted. Lightning came heavy after 3. The atrium whitened so completely it erased the frames for a breath. Reflections usually love that kind of light. Not that time. In the wash of brightness, I saw the lounge chair already turned to face the glass while I was still a dozen steps away, halfway down the hall, my book under my arm, my body walking toward a decision the chair had already made. For 10 seconds, the motion log recorded no movement in the lounge while I was visible crossing the frame. 10 seconds is a long time when your work is measured in moments that ping or don't ping. 10 seconds is an argument you have with yourself about where you believe attention lives. I smelled ozone the way you smell it right before a fluorescent bulb dies. Thin, metallic, like a breath bitten off. The vinyl of the lounge chairs takes humidity differently than fabric. It goes slippery, and when you move, you hear the smallest peel of skin from seat. I heard that sound while I stood still. It came from the chair that faced the storm. And then a voice. One word, shaped like habit and years and identical work schedules. Nurse. People like to point out that buildings creak. They shift. They answer the weather. I've walked more wards than I can count. I've heard the sound a body makes when it returns from anesthesia and the sound a sheet makes when it needs another fold. There's a difference you feel in your bones when you're being spoken to versus when you're beside a sound. I did what you'd think. I checked the floor. I walked the hallways. I made a note. I sat in the turned chair and watched lightning chain the sky and felt my skin cool where the air conditioning pushed itself into the wet. Somewhere in the middle of that, a ring of coffee appeared on the side table next to me. The porcelain mug wasn't there to make it. The circle was cold to the touch, but the skin of it made my fingertip wrinkle as if it had met heat recently. Facilities said the chair legs were uneven and vibrated into that position when the building shook from thunder. I listened because I wanted an answer I could share with my own mouth without my voice betraying me. Weeks later, long after the storms had moved into Story, I returned during daylight to drop off a form I'd forgotten. The sky was blue and unapologetic. On 6, the lounge was empty, the air punished into cooperation by humming vents. The chair faced the glass. I remembered for the first time that it had always been me who turned it back. I walked backward to the elevator so I didn't have to turn away from the chair, as if my back was a door that would invite something in if I offered it. The motion sensor, of course, slept. When a building wants to teach you what it means to wait, It gives you a time to dread. My name is Tommy Nguyen. I'm 34, a grad student who took a night security job to keep tuition paid and my head above the waterline. This was Gainesville, Florida, May of 2022. Humidity like a mouth pressed to your skin. Palms out front. Mirrored glass. One building housed a pharmaceutical startup that made the whole place feel expensive even when all you could hear were frogs and the low throat of distant traffic on I-75. I liked checklists. They made the night breakable into pieces I could manage. I chalk-marked the lobby tiles to see which ones the cleaner missed. I parked under the same camera because seeing myself arrive and leave made me believe in leaving. At 2:16 a.m., the cameras dropped. All of them. Every night. 4 minutes of nothing, and then the feed would return as if it had taken a deep breath and forgiven the world. Motion sensors across the lobby read 0 like the calmest of heart monitors. It became a joke I told to myself in different tones. The building naps. The building needs a minute. The building prays. My chalk mark on the tile by the vestibule, made just after 2, would be softly smeared when the feed returned, the way a sleeve brushes a line when someone leans in to read your handwriting. I imagined the cleaner had come and gone during that window. The schedule said otherwise. There were footsteps overhead, on the roof, 13 paces every time, always stopping above the vestibule. You can count your way into panic if you want to. I counted to remind myself numbers are simply shapes we put on fear to make it behave. The exit sign in the vestibule was loyal, except during those 4 black minutes, when it would flicker out like it had been scolded. The self-test log at 2:20 always showed a neat pass, smug as a kid who hides mud on the soles of their shoes and swears the floor is clean. I wrote a note one night and slid it under the vestibule door's sweep. "Who are you?" It felt like tossing a bottle into an ocean jokingly when you're 12, and then, 20 years later, finding the bottle on your own porch. The next night, sometime in the blackout, the note was not under the door anymore. When the feed returned, the note sat on my desk, folded the way I fold things, my own quick crease like a signature. Inside, in my own handwriting, the answer, "You." I have a rational mind until it's 2 in the morning and the building chooses a ritual for me. I decided to be in the ritual instead of outside it. I checked the latch, checked the hinges, checked my courage like a sequence in a manual. At 2:14, I locked myself inside the vestibule, a glass lung between outer and inner doors, a space meant for moving through, not living in. I set my phone to record on battery only. Independent of the building system, I wanted proof that didn't negotiate. I leaned my shoulder against the inner door so the closer wouldn't complain. The air pressure shifted at 2:16, like a bus pulling up to a curb. Subtle, decisive. My ears popped. The exit sign stayed on but seemed to throw no light, as if brightness had been reduced to design. The phone recorded a file of exactly 4 minutes. The file had weight and duration and nothing inside it. Black frames, no sound. 4 minutes of a digital object that refused to admit it hadn't seen. It felt less like failure than refusal, like being lied to by a friend who learned your tells. Something pressed the outer door's panic bar inward against my knee with the gentlest insistence, the way a crowd sometimes tests whether a door is truly locked or only pretending. It relented as if the building had checked a box on its own checklist and moved on. When the lights returned to being light, my chalk line on the tile had been dragged by a half-inch. Too careful to read as a scuff, too precise to be an accident. I tried every experiment you're imagining. I stood on the sidewalk that afternoon and watched for pigeons or a loose sign that might cast a shadow just right. I read about power cycles and battery redundancy and polite lies told by network switches. I made lists because lists are the only way to feel bigger than what you can't explain. Eventually, I added transfer to a different school to the list. Not because I was scared, though I was, but because the kind of attention this demanded made me into someone who heard 13 footsteps when any noise came from above him. On my last night, the blackout arrived a minute early at 2:15, as if to remind me I didn't get to choose the ending. The exit sign stayed lit. I held my hand under it and felt my skin not warm even a fraction. Light without warmth has an attitude that makes you look away. When I park now, anywhere, I choose a spot where my headlights face an exit. At 2:16, if I happen to be awake, I check the rear view the way you check your teeth in a window you pass, not out of vanity, but because you need a surface to tell you what you can't feel on your own. People will tell you that buildings are machines you can control if you understand them deeply enough. They're right, mostly. Maintenance is dignity. Logs are a story you write about a night you survived without any witnesses. But something else is true in ways that won't sit still when you try to name it. Places learn their people. They absorb the routines you use to keep yourself together and move when you've priced your attention and sold it to a blinking light. Marcus drew a chalk line a door decided to cross. Aaron listened to a wall breathe behind a room that officially never existed. Luis counted degrees the HVAC swore didn't matter. Dana walked toward a chair the camera decided had already moved. Tommy stepped into the exact 4 minutes the system uses to bury its memory and walked back out, changing nothing we can sign for. There's a comfort in timestamps because they act like lullabies, like parents who promise the night will be brief if you just keep your eyes shut. I used to believe the red LED meant it knew what I needed to know. Now I think it only knows what it's been told to look for. The rest waits in the blind seams and buffer rollovers, in the breath that answers yours a second late, in the way a chair chooses a window and a door chooses your knee. Somewhere between 2:03 and 2:16, on a night you haven't met yet, a place you trust will decide to remember something without you. And if you're lucky, the only thing you'll notice is that the silence has an opinion about you. Approval doesn't come as a ping. It comes as the feeling that the building has already decided where you're standing, and you're not sure you chose the spot.